was this enormous crowd pushing and jostling around this great pile of treasure, clamouring for their share. The guerrilla leader David had put the word about. From now on, when he went into action, everyone would get a slice of the cake. David smiled to himself. All the local tribe chiefs had turned up. What a brilliant way to get them on his side. And his smile dropped and his gut started to churn. Riding towards them out of the north was a messenger dressed in black. The crowd hushed and parted. David was shaking. He knew what the news would be. As the messenger swung from his saddle, David shouted, "It's the king! It's Saul, isn't it?" The messenger nodded. "He's dead, isn't he?" Once again, the messenger nodded. "And his son, Jonathan?" "Dead. All dead." There was absolute silence. Then, "The king is dead," called General Joab. "Long live the new king!" And he dropped to his knees in front of David. Then all the local tribe chiefs did the same thing. "Looks like I've got myself a kingdom," thought David. There was some pretty serious feasting and drinking that night, but David stayed in his tent. It was years since he'd played his harp, but he dusted it down and with tears in his eyes sang a song of farewell for his best friend Jonathan. And he didn't stop singing till daybreak. David being king was all very well, except that 40 miles away, General Abner was sticking a crown on the head of Saul's Weasley son, Ishbosheth. The Israelites were about to find themselves in the middle of a long and bloody civil war. Nothing much at first, a few pot shots at a border guard, the occasional suicide mission, then suddenly, blam, full-scale slaughter, brother against brother, father against son. Until one day, General Abner staggered into Ishbosheth's tent, carrying the body of a dead soldier, and he was in a real state. "Do you know who this is, Your Majesty?" he said. "It's Asahel, Joab's kid brother. What am I doing killing a bloke like him? Slaughtering Philistines is one thing, but murdering your own mates is disgusting." "You're getting soft," sneered Ishbosheth. "It's all that snogging, isn't it? All that lovey-dovey coochie-coo stuff." Abner went white. "What do you mean?" he hissed. "Don't try to deny it. I was peeking round from behind the curtain," said Ishbosheth. "Ever since Daddy died, you've been messing around with his girlfriend, haven't you? You traitor! Traitor? What do you mean, traitor? How dare you call me a traitor? If it wasn't for me holding your army together, you would be as dead as your daddy by now, you ungrateful little toad." And off he marched in a white anger. The next day, David got a really interesting message. "So Abner wants a little chat, does he? Well, tell him, OK, provided he brings my wife Michelle back. 200 Philistine foreskins she cost me." But she wouldn't come," stuttered the messenger. "When you left, she married someone else." "Too bad," snapped David. "I want her back. Get it?" His two other wives looked at each other. David could be a real swine sometimes. Next day, what do you know? Surprise, surprise, Michelle turns up. She walks straight into the camp with her husband trotting along behind her, crying like a baby and begging her to come back with him. David took her lovingly in his arms, then nodded to his men, who beat off her husband with big sticks. Then General Abner turned up with two of his officers. "I brought your wife back," he said, "and I've left Ishbosheth because he's a complete prune. How about the two of us working together, you and me, eh?" "Great," said David. "That would be great." And he ordered up a big banquet. Joab was furious. "Are you mad?" he said. "That man is a spy, it's obvious. Look what he did to my brother." "Forget your brother," said David. "This is more important. Abner has always been a big problem to me, and if there's one thing I can't stand, it's big problems. Get it?" "I think so," said Joab. And he walked straight up to Abner, and he gave him a cuddle, and he said, "Abner, me old mate, let's let bygones be bygones, OK?" "Yeah, sure thing," said Abner. And they had a few drinks, and they talked together about old times, and then they left the party together. Half an hour later, "Where's the governor?" said one of Abner's officers. They found him pretty quick. He was lying face down in the dirt, with Joab's knife stuck through his belly. What are we going to do? They hissed. If we stay here, we'll be bumped off like the boss. If we go back, Ishbosheth will hang us. Next day, they turned up at David's camp again, carrying a grubby old wet sack. "This is for you," they said, "to show you how much we want to be on your side." And they dumped it at David's feet. The sack split open. Out rolled Ishbosheth's head. "We hope you like it," they added. David's men cheered and cheered. With Ishbosheth out of the way, David could be the king of the whole of Canaan. But David looked kind of pleased, but also kind of angry. "No one must ever harm the king of the Israelites," he said. "Now you better believe it!" And he ordered the two men to be taken to a secret place where they died a horrible death. Then all the Israelites crowned David king. But king of what? They didn't want to call it Canaan anymore. This was going to be their country, the Israelites' promised land. They'd call it Israel. "And our new capital will be Hebron," said the tribe of Judah. "What, you mean the Hebron slap bang in the middle of your territory?" said the tribe of Benjamin. "Leave it out, we want the capital." "What about us?" said the tribe of Ephraim, and a full-scale fight broke out. "Wait," said David. "Look over here." On the far side of the valley, there was a sprawling hilltop town. "That will be our capital," said David. "Jerusalem." "Well, that dump," said Joab, "doesn't even belong to us. It belongs to the Jebusites." "Exactly," said David. "So none of our tribes will be able to moan it's in another tribe's territory, will they? It'll be perfect. It'll be slap bang in the middle of the new state of Israel. And what's more, it's impregnable." "Too right," said Joab. "A one-armed idiot with a sack over his head could defend Jerusalem. The problem is, how do we get in the first place?" "Even a one-armed idiot needs to drink," said David. "Find the water supply, and Jerusalem's ours." Just imagine if you'd been a Jebusite coming down for a drink that night. One moment, doopy-doopy-doo, just what I need, and the next minute, boom! Out of the water supply bursts a whole army of Israelites. The Jebusites didn't stand a chance. Within hours, David had his capital. "Right," he said, "fetch me the God box. It's about time it had a home. Jerusalem isn't just going to be a big city. From now on, it'll be a holy city." Then 30,000 Israelite soldiers carried the God box into the city, and there were fireworks and hundreds of bands. David was over the moon. He danced, he boogied, he stripped down to his underpants and did somersaults and handsprings. The crowd went wild. Up on the battlements, the servant girls were cheering and wolf whistling, and David was blowing them kisses. Then he stopped. Standing in front of him, with her lips pursed and her arms folded, was his wife, Michelle. "You total idiot," she said. "You're supposed to be king, not some poser putting himself about like a teenager with the hots. You are going to get yourself into trouble, my lad." David get himself into trouble? No way. Life was a doddle now. He hammered his old mates, the Philistines, then hammered them again and again till they were completely pacified and completely dead. Then he hammered the Edomites, the Moabites, the Amalekites, and every other sort of ites, brought their loot back to the city and turned Jerusalem into this really tasty little number. What a brilliant geezer he was. He deserved a bit of a rest, didn't he? So next spring, he sent his old mate Joab off to do his fighting for him, while he stayed at home and worked on his suntan. Then one day, he was sitting there slapping on a bit of the old Factor 4, when suddenly, through the window of the house opposite, boof! If you saw a beautiful young woman getting out of the bath with nothing on, you'd turn your head away, wouldn't you? I know I would. But David, his eyes nearly came out on stalks. "Who is that?" he gasped. "It's Bathsheba," said his courtiers, "and she's married." "I didn't ask you that." To Uriah. "All right, the Hittite. Look, just shut up and get me a piece of paper, would you?" When he'd finished writing, he sent for Uriah. "Uriah, my little old darling," he said, "listen, I've got this secret message for Joab. Would you deliver it for me?" "Your wish is my command, sire," said Uriah, who'd never realised that the king thought of him as a little old darling before, and he set off for the battlefront, glowing with pride. When he got there, Joab took the message and silently read it. Dear Joab, it said, put this idiot in the front line. I want him dead. Joab looked up. Your king has singled you out for special treatment, he said. I know, replied Uriah a bit smugly. He wants you to lead an assault for us. How do you fancy being a hero? Uriah swelled with pride. He'd always known that someday someone would give him the treatment he deserved. So, shortly afterwards, they held Uriah's funeral and everyone was really sad. And shortly after that, David and Bathsheba got married and everyone was really, really happy. Well, almost everyone. His other two wives were quite miserable, actually. Anyway, it was a lovely do, nice cake, lovely presents. Then, boom! The doors burst open and in strode this wild-eyed, long-haired, unshaven geezer. Everyone backed away and screamed. I mean, this bloke really stank. Have you got an invite? Said Bathsheba. It's Nathan the holy man, said David. Holy men don't need invites. This one certainly didn't. He leapt up and pointed a long, bony finger straight at David, and then he began to chant. You couldn't hear the words, you could just see in your mind huge cinemascope pictures of the olden days. A bunch of Israelites escaping from Egypt. Then their first sight of Canaan. Only now they're dancing around huge, horrible statues of the Canaanite gods. And now they're being clobbered by the Canaanites. Now they're dancing around stupid statues of the Philistine gods. Now they're being clobbered by the Philistines. Now they could see the young David, and it's like the sun's come out and their god's really happy. Only now, David is sending Uriah to his death, and the sun's gone back in, and it's really dark. Now it's the future. And they're dancing around these stupid, horrible statues again, only now it's really serious, because vast foreign armies are dragging them away in chains, and now they're slaves in some godforsaken, faraway land. No! Nathan stopped, snatched a slice of wedding cake, and then marched straight out of the room. There was a long, embarrassed silence. Then, that's not going to happen, David, is it? Said Bathsheba. That's not really going to happen. No way, laughed David. And everyone started chatting again, and the music struck up. But David wanted to be on his own. He wandered over to the balcony. The sun was setting over Jerusalem. Please, he whispered, please, you wouldn't, would you? Not now we've just found our promised land, please. This is a land flowing with milk and honey, isn't it? Slowly, the sky turned red.